All right.
Hey, everybody, Tony here. No fear again. I got an important episode, another episode on a subject I'm just really learning about, and the numbers are surrounding this. Both the people involved and the dollar amounts involved are astounding and staggering, mind blowing. I've got Nic McKinley from DeliverFund, and he was actually referred to me by a popular guest, Kyle Reyes, who's been on the show 2 or 3 times. If he's only been on 2, we'll have to have him on 3. But he turned me on to Nic. Nic and I had a really cool talk offline, and some of the stuff that he told me was so mind-boggling. I said, you got to get on the show. So, Nic, welcome to No Fear.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tony. I appreciate it. Appreciate you having me on, and definitely appreciate you covering the subject. It's important, and we're going to get it out there in front of people.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I I don't want this talk to be a bunch of non sequiturs, because I feel like I want to interrupt and be dramatic right up right out of the gate. You shared when we talk, and I remember telling you a bunch of times while we were talking, oh shit, we need this on the show. Let's stop talking now. Let's start off and just smack people in the face. Let's start off with the dollar value of sex slave human trafficking, as you shared that with me.
Nobody knows for sure. Our best estimates, it's about 32 billion annually and globally. So that is roughly the amount of money that the United States government spends in the war on drugs. That much money is being spent buying and selling, adults, children, human beings every single year.
Like, that number is staggering and astounding to me. What do they estimate? And I know you've qualified this from the research from that Harvard professor. What do they guess are the number of people involved in the human trafficking trade?
Yeah, so estimates on human trafficking are about 27 million. There's a recent International Labor Organization report that came out saying that it's about 40 million. One of the problems is the Walk Free Foundation essentially paid, and this is nothing against the Walk Free Foundation. They're a phenomenal organization, run by a billionaire out of Australia. They do good work, but they essentially paid the ILO to include child marriages into human trafficking.
Okay.
And really the way that you define human trafficking from the legal aspect is that there needs to be an economic incentive. So somebody needs to be making money.
Right.
And then the second piece of this is that there needs to be fraud, force, or coercion, at least in the United States. So clearly you have force, coercion, or fraud, one of those things happening within child marriages, but you don't have the economic incentive really.
Right.
And so it's not technically human trafficking or slavery. It's more servitude. It's equally horrible.
Right.
But that's why the numbers are getting so skewed. So we think that the best current statistic that we can actually back up is 27 million globally. That number might be a little high. It might be a little low. This is an underground market, an underground economy. So clearly it's very difficult to collect good data on.
It's such an interesting and crazy thing, because it's like I don't even want to use the word like subculture. I'm trying to think of a much more degrading term than culture, but it's something we don't see and something we assume. We look at when you drive by, let's say you're in a bar and you see some working girls or working people there. There's an immediate assumption. You could be in the Waldorf in New York, that they're there and that's their business and they're actually incorporated. And some of them are, but more than not, these people are there because the alternative is violence and danger, right? If they don't comply.
Absolutely. Really what you get into and what you're alluding to, Tony, is the difference between prostitution and human trafficking, right? These are two very, very different things, right? Prostitution You know, that's not our fight. We can talk about, you know, maybe some of the reasons, you know, past trauma or things, reasons why these girls might choose to engage in this type of, in that type of industry, but it's still a choice. And when we look at prostitution and the way that we define it internally, because we have to have a filter, right? We can't do everything for everybody all the time.
Right.
Wish we could, but we can't. So the way that we define this is that you have a prostitute is somebody who's providing a service and getting to keep the proceeds from that service, right? So they're keeping the proceeds of their labor, so to speak. A human trafficking victim, well, that is a slave, cut and dry. And so that is really the difference there. Now, prostitution is a real thing. It does exist, and there are people who choose to prostitute themselves. But human trafficking is not that. Now, prostitutes are a population that is vulnerable to human trafficking, just like people smuggled in across the border. That is rarely human trafficking. That is smuggling. Right. And those people get into the United States, and they are a population that is susceptible to human trafficking, but one, it does not equal the other.
Right. And the reason I brought it up and you explained it in the most sympathetic Sesame Street terms for me, like Ernie and Bert explaining the difference between prostitute and human trafficking. And I kind of did that for our listeners. And I'm for like, let me just pre-brief and say, like, I wouldn't have been able to articulate the difference like that. But I think it's valuable because, part of this and how it happens, it's just easy to turn your cheek and just not even see it because it's so underground. And so I wanted you, and you did a good job, and it educated me, but more for anybody listening to this and anybody sharing this is to, you know, most of the world who doesn't understand what you're going after confuses the two, even though the distinction, the definition are huge. You know, human trafficking, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but understanding that because there are, in the classic movie sense, that the layperson who doesn't have like firsthand knowledge thinks of the prostitute works for a pimp and she gets smacked every so often, and if she doesn't, you know, and there's violence, but she's still a paid employee, and in some cases it's horrific. But what I'm trying to get people to understand is like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is like human trafficking involves a kidnapping of another human who then is threatened to work, and if they don't, they are beaten or maybe tortured or killed, and then that person who is selling their services, making all the money, this person's like in a literal and proverbial cell their whole life. You know, I mean, that's just what I'm extrapolating from this.
Absolutely. And I'll give you two examples here. So, you know, when we say kidnapping, right, really what we're talking about is somebody being held against their will. So this is not the movie Taken, right? This is right. Not, you know, Liam Neeson running around, you know, the one-man national asset, you know, cracking skulls all over the world. What this is somebody being controlled. And what's really important is the legal definition. So the legal definition is, you know, some type of an economic incentive where somebody's being held against their will through fraud, force, or coercion. So if one of those three things is present, all of them are usually present, but right. If at least one of them is present, then you're good to go. Like, that is human trafficking. And that's what we use. There's a lot of people that will try to confuse the issue. They'll try to say, oh, well, child pornography is human trafficking. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Human smuggling is human trafficking. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Right? But if you have economic incentive, somebody being held against their will through fraud, force, or coercion, then you've got human trafficking. Now, when we talk about somebody being held against their will, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, being kept in a dog crate. Now, that is actually a real thing. We worked a case with Homeland Security where the girls were actually being kept in dog crates. Wow. And that human trafficker actually did abduct these girls. One of them tried to escape. He killed her, left her body in a park as kind of a message to the rest of the girls. He's currently looking at 40 years.
Not enough.
And not enough at all. But it's better than the minimum mandatory sentence of 15 years that he would have got just for the human trafficking charge. So when you look at all of this, some of these girls are held, and it's an extreme version of Stockholm syndrome. And it's not just girls, there's boys as well, but it's primarily girls. So, for the sake of this conversation, we'll just usually refer to them as girls. They're held against their will. And there's an extreme amount of fear there, but they also, their brains have had to go to some pretty dark places in order just to exist, just to survive. And so in many cases, they've convinced themselves that they actually love this guy. And let's not confuse the issue here. When we say the word pimp, what we mean is slaveholder, human trafficker. So for any pimps that may be listening to this, like, these are bad people. These are evil people. There is no such thing as a good pimp, right? Like, these are bad human beings, and they either need to quit or they need to be taken down by the system.
Right. Let me inject something
one of those two things needs to happen.
Yeah. That very important point. No such thing as a good pimp. I like that. That's a good T-shirt. You mentioned Stockholm syndrome, and a lot of people probably have no clue what it is. And if they're driving, they're not going to like Google that. And so Stockholm syndrome is in the case when someone has been, typically where it originated, and correct me and add to this, you have a lot more experience than I have in this, and we didn't even talk about your background, but is somebody who's kidnapped for enough time that they start to identify with their captor and psychologically befriend them, even though they are the enemy. At some point, there's a relationship that's developed with them. But elaborate on that, because I think, and I want you to circle back on that, because you got somebody who typically is like a youngster. I'm sure adults get pulled into this, but much easier. You got like runaways and scared kids who are troubled, and they're so predisposed or set up just emotionally for this type of manipulation. And that Stockholm syndrome can happen really quickly, where it's like, hey, see what happens? You don't listen to me. I'm going to feed you. I'm going to take care of you. Now go do this. But elaborate on that, because it's horrific, but important for people to understand what's actually going on with these kids who turn into adults emotionally and psychologically here.
Sure. So the average age of a human trafficking victim is 14 years old.
Wow.
We've had a number of human traffickers that we have targeted that when the case was done, we found out that some of the girls that they had were maybe 16, but they'd actually been running those girls since they were 12.
Wow.
So you're absolutely right. It is usually teenage girls. That's who they target. And there's this narrative that any girl can be a human trafficking victim. And on the face of it, that's true, right? However, you start adding the number one risk factor, which is lack of a father. You start adding, lack of God, lack of education, lack of access to resources, low socioeconomic status, which usually means mom's working 2 full-time jobs to try to keep food on the table, which means there's not adequate supervision, and the girl decides to go hang out at the mall with her friends. So let me kind of explain to you how this is going to work. Guy walks in, usually a couple years older, relatively good looking guy, comes in, starts showering the girl with gifts, starts through what they call the Romeo model, actually becomes her friend, becomes her boyfriend. And then, as one of our victims that we worked with a video on our website, a girl named Samantha, not her real name. She says that, you're talking to these boys that she thought, or this boy that she thought was her boyfriend. And all of a sudden he was like, hey, if you love me, you'll go sleep with these other guys. So clearly that's something that they don't want to do. And then the physical violence comes out, and then the narcotics come out. And narcotics are really important here. Opiates are the drug of choice. We've seen cocaine used as well, but preferably opiates. And the reason why opiates are a business decision for these traffickers.
Right.
You know, you can die of alcohol withdrawal. You can die of withdrawals from other cheaper drugs, right? You can die from meth. Clearly, meth does not keep their product, so to speak, looking good over time. So what they do is they hit them up with heroin, or they give them prescription pills, Percocets, things along those lines. And the girls tell us that the withdrawals are so bad that it feels like their bones are crushing from inside their body. And so it gets to the point where once they get them hooked, and they give them bigger and bigger and bigger doses, once they get them hooked on, or these traffickers get these girls hooked on the opiates, then they don't need to beat them anymore. They just withhold the drugs. Right. So we've had girls who've been hooked on heroin for 3 or 4 years, and they don't even know how to shoot themselves up, because the traffickers, essentially business partners, would come in and shoot them up every time that they needed it. And who are the business partners? Well, the business partners are usually other trafficked girls. So when we talk about the Stockholm syndrome, it's a girl ends up being a trafficking victim, and then she starts identifying so much with the trafficker, and that's what her brain needs to do to survive. She starts identifying with the trafficker so much that she then becomes a trafficker herself. And she essentially becomes what they call the top girl, the bottom girl, the backup girl. They've got a number of names for them, but she's essentially that trafficker's business manager at that point, right? She's the one who shoots up the girls, gets the food, runs the logistics, those kinds of things, and is usually at that point, prostituting herself at the same time.
It's insane, man. Go back to the numbers again. I'm recalling something from our conversation. And you said it earlier, but it went by too fast for me, and I was just processing everything. Was the estimated dollar value of human trafficking against gun running and drugs? Where does that sit?
So it's between number 3 and number 4. There's a narrative that human trafficking is quickly becoming the world's number 1 illicit commodity. It's just not true. The data doesn't back that up. Professor Patterson at Harvard and Professor Carr at Harvard are the world's leading experts on this research. That's where you can go, look it up for yourself. But it is definitely, number 3 or number 4. Narcotics is number 1 by a long shot, right? And there's a couple of different kind of myths I'd like to dispel here. One is that, well, you can make a lot more money, as a human trafficker. That is just not true. The maintenance costs on your commodity are significantly higher. You can't stick a human trafficking victim in a shipping container or in a storage facility for weeks on end and not feed them, water them, right? You can't put them in an airtight container. Like that's not good for their business. Right. But you can with narcotics. It's a lot easier to ship narcotics. Yes, human trafficking victims can be continually used and essentially create recurring revenue, but they also have significant maintenance costs. Right. So what we have found is that the major majority of human traffickers are people who, quite frankly, didn't have the stomach for violence that was required to sell drugs. So they're the weakest of the criminals. It's no wonder that they're preying on the weak, amongst our society because they're the weakest of the criminals. So they're essentially the biggest bullies. So, then you look at gun running. Gun running is usually number 2. And it kind of credit card fraud and bank fraud. And gun running just kind of continually switch places. And the main reason for that is the wars. So, you know, the war in Syria kicks off, gun running becomes number two. As the wars die down, credit card fraud and bank fraud take over as number two. So those two kind of flip back and forth, and then human trafficking comes in fourth, which really at the end of the day, who cares if it's number two or if it's number four?
It's still huge.
We're talking human beings here. It's an incredibly horrible thing. And so, you know, if a bunch of guns are getting run, like it's just a bunch of guns, right? A bunch of banks are getting ripped off. We have a pretty good system for dealing with that, right? We have also, on top of all of this, we have whole government agencies that are dedicated to this, right? So we have, you look at terrorism and gun running and credit card and bank fraud, and we have all of this. Narcotics, we have a DEA. You look at gun running, we have a, you know, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. I mean, I'm sitting here in New Mexico, and in probably most places in New Mexico, you can find, you know, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms in the same room because they're all legal. But where's our counter human trafficking agency, right? Where is who's got the ball? And that's what we realized and why we started DeliverFund.
Well, that's
which is our counter human trafficking organization, is because nobody's really got the ball.
Well, that's actually where I was leading with that. I wanted people to kind of get a sense of just how huge this is, and you hit the nail on the head. The people that are, you know, a poppy plant isn't arguing whether it's going to get picked or not, right? It's just the poppy plant.
Right.
And somebody who's building a gun, like, you know, the lower isn't going, oh, don't ship me to California. Like, I don't want to be compliant. Right. So that's a gun joke for everybody who's in California. Thank you. I'll be here all day. But there is some kid fucking getting grabbed and manipulated into a horrific, and even like the PTSD and the trauma, like even once they're rescued, and that's a whole other conversation. But what I wanted to get at here is there really is, and it's just kind of coming to light like recently, where, I mean, human trafficking has been around probably for as long as there's been, you know, like civilization, right? I mean, there's always been slaves. And so it's amazing to me, but talk a little bit about this, because we do have the DEA and the ATF and other stuff there. Why don't you do like a little synopsis of what you can about your background? And then what was there a specific event that led you to go, well, I gotta get involved in this?
Sure. So my background, I spent 11 years in the Air Force pararescue teams, did a couple years of private personnel recovery for investment banks, which is just a fancy way of saying I was getting a bunch of rich investment bankers out of trouble in Africa and Libya and places like that.
Nice.
And then I got recruited over to the CIA. I spent a number of years there. They actually won't allow me to say the exact number of years. And I was very, very fortunate. And, you know, when you talk about the CIA, most people, you know, the general public thinks that it's a bunch of Jason Bournes running around.
Right.
And the CIA is an incredible organization. It's just full of incredibly bright, patriotic men and women who are the best in the world at their job. I mean, hopefully your listeners have realized that we don't have planes crashing into buildings, and we don't have bombs blowing up in LA rush hour traffic. So we're pretty good at what we were doing, right? However, the major majority of people at the agency are essentially, you know, academics and professional typists. And that's not to degrade that kind of work. I mean, that's incredibly important work. And guys like me actually worked for those types, right? Worked for the analysts. Like, they were the ones telling us what to go get and where to go get it from. But I found myself in one of the smallest kinetic units in the agency. There's really only two of them, you know, and by that I mean guys who carry guns in anger. I'm not allowed to say the name of the unit, which is kind of dumb because it's been all over the media. But you know, rules are rules, and I got to follow them.
Of course.
So I was doing that work, and a lot of counter narcotics work, specifically in, places where they grow a lot of poppies. You can use your imagination where that might be. A lot of counterterrorism work in North Africa. And in doing that work, you don't do that work and pay attention and not continually bump into human trafficking. So I remember being in a place where they grow a lot of poppies, and we were doing counter narcotics work, and we found a bunch of human trafficking information. And this is, I'd seen it before. I'd seen it as a PJ. I'd seen it through other entities. And I always just assumed, like, again, somebody had the ball. Like, clearly, as a country, we can kill people with flying robots from 6,000 miles away. Surely we're doing something about this. I mean, I was probably just as naive as anybody else. And so anyway, we ended up bumping into this human trafficking related information with one of our JSOC partners, Joint Special Operations Command partners. And we were looking for, like, where to put it, like, who do we give it to? And I remember this essentially JSOC equivalent of a case officer was telling me, he's like, hey man, like, nobody wants it. Like, I've written this up and nobody wants the report. And that just made me really curious. So, when you work at the agency, you've got a top secret, TSSCI security clearance with a full scope poly. So it's the highest security clearance you can get, which means that there's really nothing that's off limits to you. If you want to dig through the system and find things, then you can. And so I started digging through the system to figure out, like, who does this? And what I found is that there's nobody in the system. It wasn't even a mandatory reporting requirement. And so that made me curious, and that's usually a bad thing. I'm basically a nerd. I haven't owned a TV for over 10 years, and I read consistently. And so I started looking into, okay, clearly this can't be true. Somebody's got to have this. Somebody's got to take lead on it. And what I found was that if you look at human trafficking as football on a football field, lots of referees, tons of cheerleaders. There's a couple people dancing around the ball. There's lots of movement happening, but there's no progress. Nobody was actually advancing the ball towards the end zone. With the exception of, in this country, we have local and state law enforcement officers who are doing incredible work with no resources, no technology. I mean, some of the law enforcement officers we work with, when I first show up in their office, they're using butcher paper and Sharpies to map out these human trafficking networks. And so once I realized it was the local and state guys doing the work, well, that allowed me to step back a little and say, wait a minute, they're essentially an indigenous population, right?
Right.
So if I can go into North Africa, or I can go into any number of countries overseas, and I can find indigenous populations where I don't know the language, I don't understand the culture. We like to think we do, but we don't. I don't really understand anything about it. I don't really care about them that much. And I can turn them into a formidable force. Then imagine what I can do if I take that same approach with law enforcement officers who I understand their language, I understand their culture, they're well educated, they're motivated. I can actually make a much bigger impact. And so at DeliverFund, we work through an equip, train, and advise model where we equip law enforcement, we train them, and we equip them with technologies that we've been very blessed in that we have proprietary access to some of the best technologies in the world, artificial intelligence algorithms coming straight out of DARPA that have been filtered through a university to be able to do work in this space. The platform for the analysis and targeting of human traffickers, which is essentially it's akin to a human trafficking network chart, very similar to Palantir. We own that. It's just very, very cool stuff that we've got. And so we equip law enforcement officers with these technologies, and then we train them how to use it. use those technologies, and then we advise them on kind of where the bad guys are going and support them with intelligence on specific human traffickers, so that they can do human trafficking cases at scale. And that's important, because what we don't need and what law enforcement doesn't need is a bunch of rogue vigilantes out there trying to go play cop for a day, right? Law enforcement officers don't need my help doing sting operations. Sting operations are old 1970s anyway. I mean, I can identify a human trafficker's location within 3 hours without ever leaving my keyboard. And the reality of today is that, you know, the operators of today, outside of the government, if you aren't as good with a keyboard as you are a gun, then you're a dinosaur.
Right.
So you have to be able to run the technology. And when it comes to hunting human traffickers, we're the world's foremost experts in it, primarily because of the technologies that we have access to.
I don't know if in telling that story and sharing it, and I know I'm not the first person you talked to, that if you've noticed the serendipitous irony that you've become the analysts that used to provide you guys with the intel when you were the point guys, you know.
Yeah.
But it's nice because you know, like you said, like, you know, I've been training cops for almost 3 decades now, and the biggest thing is they're always short staffed. Their agency doesn't have any money. They can't get time off for training. They're not paid enough to do the training on their own. And so, you know, when you make a joke, hey, they're like armed with like cardboard and Sharpies and like duct tape and you know, like it's not far. It's an exaggeration, but it's not far from the truth. And the bad guys, the successful ones, have almost discretionary fund, unlimited budgets for their gadgets and their shit. So it's
absolutely. And let's take it even one step farther. You don't even have to be good these days. You don't even really have to be that smart to be a bad guy and get away with a lot. I mean, the encryption genie is out of the bottle, and it's never going back. I don't care what kind of regulations the government's put in place, that is never going back. So right now, you and I are talking on Zoom, which I believe is 128-bit encrypted signal, right? Yeah. So you can break that if you've got a big enough computer, but the cops don't have those computers. Right. So it doesn't even matter. If you've got an iPhone that's encrypted at I believe it's the advanced encryption service, so AES 256-bit algorithm, right? The government can't even crack that. I mean, not in any reasonable amount of time, right? To make the information that's in there actually relevant to their case. So companies have essentially created, you know, that in the name of privacy, which is important, but they've essentially created technologies that bad guys can hide, they can hide under. So you got a bad guy who's using some type of, or a human trafficker who's using some type of encrypted messaging service, just like iMessage. Right. And now all of a sudden, it's very hard for law enforcement to get what it is they need. So we had to get away from this old school mentality of we're just going to subpoena everything, because a lot of the information that they need to subpoena actually isn't even available. And we had to get into a new mindset of what we call target-centric analysis method, which is kind of actually reverting back to the old school, getting a lot of human intelligence and combining that with electronic intelligence. And when people say human intelligence, they think, oh, that means you need to be running sources on the street. Well, if you're running sources on the street, you're not very creative and you don't know what you're doing. You can actually get all the human intelligence you need without ever leaving your computer. And there is a lot of irony in that because, you know, I mean, I was a special operator. I, you know, worked at a unit in the agency where I could run guns with the best of them. I'm not the best, but I can hang with the best. You know, I've been training under Greg Jackson for years. I'm definitely not the best fighter, but I can hang with some pretty good fighters. Yet at the end of the day, I'm a cyber nerd.
Right.
I'm sitting here hacking keyboards and providing that intel, and I've got about 32 people doing it.
Nice.
Providing that intel to law enforcement officers sometimes in real time.
That's amazing, man. This is, like, I'm thinking here, how can the general public, because like some of this stuff like this stuff is happening under cloak and dagger. I don't even know if that's the right expression, but I mean, it's like, it's, people aren't at Disneyland flaunting like this sort of stuff. It's in the underworld. People, it's not overt, what are there things that the people can look for to help alert you guys and stuff, or is it like, what are the things that we can do? I've walked around and let's go back to the prostitute human trafficking analogy. I've seen lots of prostitution in my life as a observer. I want to point out, walking around, but I've never walked by and went, oh, like there's a girl getting shoved into the trunk of a car, she must be a prostitute. No, I haven't seen that insidious side of that. So talk us through a little bit of the obvious stuff is, hey, go to the website, donate, that's the obvious thing for any of it. I know, and I want you to talk about the different organizations and stuff like that. But are there actually things that we can look for and help, or has this become one of those crazy, don't call the police and, they're not going to, like the tip line,
No, and that's actually the biggest thing I would like the public to understand. Do not call us. We won't take your tips.
Right.
We have in 3 years, we've only had one public tip actually turn out to be human trafficking. And it was a case that we were already on anyway. Nice. Most of the time when people start hearing about human trafficking, they see narcotics activity and they're like, oh, that's human trafficking. No, it's narcotics activity. Or they see prostitution and they think that it's human trafficking. And there's a narrative out there that all prostitutes are human trafficking victims. Just not true.
Right.
Right? It's just not true. So the best thing that the public can do is, if you think that you see human trafficking, don't call Polaris, don't call NCMEC, call your local law enforcement officers. Start with your jurisdiction, and then call all the neighboring jurisdictions, and then call the county sheriff, right? And then call the FBI, and then call Homeland Security. Call everybody directly. Don't call nonprofits, because what's a nonprofit going to do, right? A nonprofit, so like at DeliverFund as an example, we do not and cannot collect evidence. And any nonprofit that says they can collect evidence doesn't know the law.
Right.
You have to be an agent of the state. You have to have a badge. You have to have the authority of the state in order to collect evidence, and you have to collect that evidence within the rules of evidence collection in order to have it admitted in court. And so what we do at DeliverFund is what is called parallel construction. So we go out, we're like the nosy old lady looking out her window, right? She sees a guy in a ski mask carrying a TV out of her neighbor's house. She calls the cops. Now, the cops cannot arrest that guy in the ski mask because that could be the neighbor. It could be cold out, right? But that gives them the probable cause they need to get the case started. Right. To show up to the house, ask the man to remove his ski mask, and see whether or not, there's actually a crime being committed. But if there is a crime being committed, it's the presence of the law enforcement officer that allows that person to be prosecuted, not the presence of some nonprofit, right? Right. And so if you think you see human trafficking, I just can't beat this horse enough. Call the cops. Right. So we actually do not take tips from the public. We work directly with law enforcement officers and prosecutors. And we have a waiting list of law enforcement officers trying to work with us. When law enforcement officers are coming to us, we can tell whether or not it's a human trafficking case within about 3 hours. That's a process that used to take some of the best detectives about 21 days. And it's only because through what we have with PATH and then with some of our commercial partners, folks like Marinus Analytics and Traffic Jam, and I'm sure other nonprofits are going to try to go get access to Traffic Jam. You can't. We have exclusive access to it. You're looking at about 300 million data points going back to 2011. So when you've got access to that kind of data, plus we're partnered with IBM and LexisNexis, so we've got some really big computers and the data on top of it. We can connect all those dots, and the computers can connect those dots within about 3 hours. So when when you call a law enforcement officer and you say, I think this is human trafficking, we teach law enforcement officers how to check right then and there in real time whether or not there is a probability of human trafficking. And if there is, then they can actually do something about it, and you can actually start that case process.
Do you mentioned that you train officers? Is this an in-person class or an online class, a combination? I've got a lot of cops and first responders that listen to my podcast. So when you say, hey, we got a waiting list, these are people that are trying to get access. They think they've got something and they're trying to get access to you in the computer to evaluate, or they're trying to get trained on how to, or both?
So both. Unfortunately, with limited resources, we just can't support every jurisdiction all the time. Right. So we're pretty careful about who we approach when we approach jurisdictions. There's a narrative that the cops don't care. That is just not true. We have yet to have a single jurisdiction tell us no. Every single place we've gone to say, hey, we can help you, or who've come to us, we've been able to do something with them. Now, our training course is what we call our Counter Human Trafficking Intelligence Operations course. It is an in-person course here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have a 7,000 square foot training facility with 2,000 square feet of mats and modular wall shoot house and classrooms, and it's pretty cool stuff. And what law enforcement is trying to do is get here to come to our training. It's the only training course of its kind. We've trained everybody from DHS to Bureau of Indian Affairs to small town county sheriffs from the middle of nowhere, rural America. Like this, we trained a county sheriff's deputy from Montana, like all the way up by the Canadian border. He was out in the middle of nowhere, just a one-man wrecking ball, doing phenomenal work. And when we train them, again, we also are giving them the technologies, but we also teach them. A lot of law enforcement officers don't learn how to properly control human trafficking victims, how to properly talk with them. So we bring in experts for that. And then Greg Jackson, who's one of my board members and the famed MMA coach, we put together a system to teach law enforcement officers how to handle human trafficking victims. Because what are human trafficking victims? They're intelligence assets, right?
Right.
And so most cops know how to fight to some level, but they tend to use way more force than they really need to. Because they're used to fighting people on the street. Well, you've got a 90-pound human trafficking victim who freaks out on you, and you're a law enforcement officer, and you punch her in the throat. That doesn't go a long way towards building rapport. Right. So we teach them how to control these girls in a way that protects them, doesn't hurt the girl, allows them to build rapport and gain the girl's trust. And then we bring in experts like Tame and Nagy who help train the law enforcement officers on how to talk to these girls to get the information they need. Because one of the sad things about human trafficking, to get human trafficking charges, now there's other ways around this, but in order to get a human trafficking charge, you have to have a human trafficking victim testify against that trafficker. Unless it's an underage victim, then it's pretty cut and dry. But if they're not underage, as in they turned 18 7 days ago, and they don't have that cut and dry human trafficking case, so they need the victim to testify, which clearly requires the victim to get.
I'm sure they're thrilled to get that. Yeah.
Yeah, but also, you talked about the trauma, and I'm not an expert on trauma, even remotely. But girls who are abducted or held against their will have psych issues. Girls who are on narcotics have psych issues. Girls who are sexually abused have psych issues. Girls who are physically abused, emotionally abused, right? Each one of those creates a psychological issue for most people. These girls are dealing with all of them simultaneously. And then you throw them on a stand and they get grilled by some, Yale law trained defense attorney. And these defense attorneys are just as bad as these traffickers. If you're a defense attorney and you're listening and you're defending human traffickers, you're a bad person. It's just black and white. There's no two ways around it. So anyway, these girls don't necessarily make for the best witnesses. So we also have a way, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but it's super cool. Basically, if you're a human trafficker, we can follow your money. So you think you're using wire services and you're getting away with it. You're not. We know where you're wiring that money, who you're wiring that money to, how much. We can do that in a large number of states. We work with companies that run prison communications. We work with companies who, some very, very big social media companies. So we've created a Hobson's choice for the traffickers, right? So we've set up the chessboard in a way so that no matter what way they move, we're going to win and they will lose. And that's kind of the key, because if there's anything I learned from the CIA, it's that any plan that has to be kept secret in order to succeed is not a good plan, right? Your plan should be able to succeed even if it gets posted on the front of the New York Times. And that is what we have created within a methodology for these going after these human traffickers. So we can get them for money laundering, we can get them for running criminal enterprises, we can get them for all kinds of things that don't require the girls to testify and that are pretty black and white. If you laundered money, it's ones and zeros, right? It's binary. Either you did or you did not. There's really no gray space. There's really no in between. And in many cases, the minimum mandatory sentencing for laundering money is actually higher, especially at the local and state level, than it is for human trafficking. So we work with law enforcement and prosecutors to hit these guys with all kinds of different charges. We have a case in Arizona that we're working right now with the Attorney General's office. The guy's facing over 30 charges. You only have to have one of those stick, and the guy goes away for over a decade. And he's a pretty bad human trafficker. But as the Arizona Attorney General's office said in a presentation I was at with them, they said working with DeliverFund makes hunting human traffickers like shooting fish in a barrel. Very cool, man. You talked about the numbers of victims. How many, if I said to you, like, how many major, mob families are there? There might be like a number. These guys control New York and these guys control. Is there something like that in human trafficking, or are there like thousands of, the like micro and macro little gangs and units? I mean, the number of victims you mentioned is huge. I can only imagine like if you put a trafficker every day behind bars, that'd be 365. Mm-hmm. Like, so what is there, like 300,000 more, 1 million more? I mean, any idea how many? I mean, it's just like ants, right? Or just fucking all over the place. So this isn't a top-down hierarchical network like people want other people to believe. It's what I like to call a loose affiliation of like minds, right? You're in the fighting arts and martial arts business for the last 3 decades, so people in that business, right? And if you need a guest instructor or someone to help out or someone to run something by, that who makes this type of gear that's the best, and who makes that type of gear that's the best. And it's the same thing in the criminal enterprises. You know, you got the ID guy, you got the money laundering guy, you got the guy who gets you scripts, right? And then you've got your human traffickers, and there are organized crime, human trafficking. But what we find is that for the most part, organized crime just tends to control territory through violence. And then they don't care what you do on that territory as long as you are paying up.
Now, my question sucked. I was using that. I was all over the place. What I meant was how many human traffic or like organizations or groups do you estimate there are out there? Because there's thousands of organizations trying to fight it. Some very legit, some less legit. Is there any estimate? Like if you said to me, how many bad guys are there on the planet? I'd go, fuck, who the fuck knows?
Yeah.
Right. Like,
right. It's kind of the same thing. So you can do some basic napkin math to get a very, very rough interpolation of the problem, right? So we think that there's about 100,000 people who enter the human trafficking industry every year as victims. Your average human trafficker can run 3 to 5 girls, right? So let's just say it. Now we have had human traffickers who only had one girl. Right. They were just able to make enough money off that one girl. And we've had human traffickers who had 7, 10, and even more. So let's just say 3. So, 30,000 human traffickers within the United States at any one given time. That's not an unreasonable number. But let's keep in mind that this is so underground that we're just kind of doing napkin math here, trying to figure out roughly what it might look like. Are there hundreds of thousands of human traffickers in the United States? Absolutely not. But are there tens of thousands? I think that's a safe bet.
Well, having one out there is enough, right? As a, kind of an understatement, but there's a lot. What is, I try to keep these shows about an hour, so we're coming up on that. We've got a lot of good, deep, hopefully like some different angles and stuff from other interviews. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you go, man, fuck, I wish Tony had brought this up, or I got to get this out? What's
There's two things that I'd like to cover. One, so I'm not sure if you were following the whole SESTA FOSTA law in Congress around the Communications Decency Act Rule 230. Some people listening are going to know exactly what I'm talking about. The law that was going to break the internet and all that. And there's a narrative that because there's a website called Backpage.com. Backpage.com was essentially the clearinghouse for human trafficking victims. They were in on it. And that's not just me saying that. I mean, they were taken down by the DOJ for that reason. But it's very important that these websites that are facilitating human trafficking and making it easier for human traffickers by eliminating metadata out of photos and doing those types of things, accepting cryptocurrencies, just making it very difficult for law enforcement to figure out who is behind that advertisement. It's very important that the internet not just be the Wild West, right? That we have some type of ability to find these criminals and hold them accountable. And so there's a narrative that CDA 230 and the SESTA FOSTA bill that actually amended the Communications Decency Act and created some liability for some of these internet platforms is a bad thing, and it's just not. And you've got some people saying that, well, Backpage.com went away and now it's harder to fight human trafficking. No, actually it's not. We had a big part to do with that at DeliverFund, and this is actually the first time I'm saying that publicly. It created massive chaos in the human trafficking market. And we don't look at human trafficking as like, you got a human trafficker and you got a victim. No, it's a marketplace. And we look at it as a market. And our whole goal as an organization is to start little fires and just start burning that market to the ground, making it very, very difficult to do business for these human traffickers. And with the takedown of Backpage.com is a perfect example. Backpage.com was seized by the Department of Justice. So you've got all of the customers started laying low because they didn't know what that meant for them.
Right.
Right. So no one was spending any money in the human trafficking market. And then you had human traffickers weren't able to, some of them started laying low because they didn't know what that all meant for them. And then the ones that were still trying to do business, they didn't know where to go to get their product in front of the customer. So you didn't have any commerce happening. So nobody was making any money. And that's our whole strategy. That's the whole point, is if we make it so that it's hard for human traffickers to make money, they'll go do something else. I mean, they're bad people. They will go do bad things, no doubt. Probably go do something that we actually have agencies designed to disrupt. But when there's no commerce happening, no one's making any money, nobody traffics people for ideological purposes, right? They traffic human beings to make money. And so our entire strategy through equipping, training, and advising law enforcement, through our advising Congress on issues like Backpage.com and their complicity, and all of these different pieces is all about just creating chaos in the human trafficking market, so that we can take their money and break their toys and make sure that they can't survive in polite society as a human trafficker. Does that make sense?
Yeah. When that whole thing with the Backpage went down and everything, did that created disruption? Did it lead to any arrests or any captures or any saves or anything? And I understand it's a two-part thing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So clearly you had the owners of Backpage and whatnot, according to the DOJ indictments, were very much in on it. Their CEO has actually pled guilty to a number of the charges. But it absolutely did, because when you have a platform that you can hide under, it's essentially a ghillie suit. And you can't see the sniper when they're holding still. You can only see them when they move.
Right.
And so when we shut down Backpage.com and the DOJ seized it, those traffickers had to move to other websites. And through some of our commercial partners, I mean, we've got access to data that's being scraped out of the top 12 websites. So what did they do? They went to all 12 of them. And this website might, take metadata out of photos, and this website might capture email addresses, and this might capture phone numbers, right? So they go to one and they think that they're hiding. And it's true, with just access to just one website, they would be able to hide. But we have access to them all.
Right.
And so we're able to take all those different data points and attribute them to an actual human being and actual activity. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, fighting human trafficking is not something you do off the side of your desk. It is something that you have a passion for. And it's not just words, you actually are doing it. So I can tell you that, at DeliverFund, we're fighting human trafficking 7 days a week. Not 24 hours a day, because we just don't have access to that kind of funding. But I would say over half of the staff of DeliverFund are doing something to fight human trafficking 7 days a week. And that's the type of commitment that it takes. So we have more education and awareness of human trafficking right now than we do at any point in the history of the world. Thank you, Ashton Kutcher. Right? We have massive education awareness on the issue, yet the problem continues to grow. So that would lead somebody to believe that maybe education and awareness is not the solution to this problem. When you look at human trafficking as an equation, right? I'm a math nerd, I'll admit it. When you look at it as an equation, the common denominator in that equation is the human trafficker. You cannot have human trafficking victims if you do not have a human trafficker. So if we're serious about fighting human trafficking, it's important that we help victims when we can, where we can, but the majority of our resourcing should be going after the human trafficker. That's the actual elimination of the problem, not just spending a bunch of money on cleanup.
Right. Good points, man. Great points. I will include access to your website and stuff in the show notes and stuff like that. Dude, this was fascinating. I want to, can't wait to release this in the next couple of weeks. Share it. Again, education isn't the answer, like you said, but I'm hoping that a bunch of the cops and military and other people who listen to our show share it with their colleagues all over the place, so they can access you and other leaders in the industry, and get the right training, get the right stuff. It's still mind-boggling that, like you said, there is an office of a department of XYZ to handle everything. And I maybe we'll save this for another call, but there's something insidious in something kind of dark and sickly that there isn't, because and I think we joked about this, or not joked about it, in a deprecating way, that when all the shit happened in Hollywood with all the sex scandal and stuff like that, it was like nobody wanted to talk about it. So there's almost like this thing, like this stuff goes on, but we know about it, but we don't want to talk about it, or we permit it. There's that whole other, maybe we'll open a can of worms right now, but do you, well, I'm going to ask you this, do you know or have a philosophy as to why there actually isn't, in the same way we've got, DA and ATF and FBI, there are very specific offices, and they're very specifically going, these guys go after bank robbers, these guys go after prostitution, these guys go after guns. Like human trafficking is older than gun running and drug running, right?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Absolutely. On this? And so two reasons. And I'll try not to get too nerdy here, but if you want to just break it down to the absolute basics, Dave Grossman, Colonel Grossman, came up with the term, the universal human phobia, which is intrapersonal human aggression, right? You've spent your entire career teaching people how to overcome that. And the hardest thing I'm sure that you've had to do is just teach them to close with another human being. Right. You can give them all the skills in the world, all the techniques, but they still don't want to close with another human being. So it's very, very difficult for people just to wrap their mind around the horrible things that one human will do to another, right? So that's one of it. Two, our government tends to focus on things that kill people quickly, not things that kill people slowly, right? So it takes us years and years and years before we finally start putting warnings on cigarette packets. We still, alcohol is still very, very easy to get. We're legalizing other drugs. Car wrecks kill people, but not near to the level that, say, smoking does. But we have seatbelt laws. Right? How many people die from motorcycle wrecks, yet we have helmet laws? You talked about guns in California. I'm not even going to open that can, because that'll be another 3 hours of you and I talking. But you get the point. The government tends to focus on things that kill people quickly, not things that kill people slowly.
Interesting.
And human trafficking usually kills people slowly, not quickly. There are a couple cases we've been involved in where, girls have been sold for no more than a couple weeks before they were murdered. But for the most part, it kills people slowly. And then you also have really the advent of the internet is what caused the major explosion, because this used to happen on street corners. And that's a good thing, because cops can find things that happen on street corners, right? We have cameras. We have lots of ability to do that. What the internet did, it started with Craigslist, but then Craigslist got out of the business, and with websites like Backpage.com and Eki and many others, is they made it so that this crime was then happening behind closed doors, which made it a lot harder for law enforcement to find and actually see the crime. Enter DeliverFund, right? And what we have done is the very tools that the human trafficker is using to hide from the law enforcement officers, we are using those very tools against these human traffickers. And what it all comes down to is advertisements, right? They have to advertise their product to their customer. That's it.
Right.
And so if they have to advertise our product, if they touch the internet, and they touch the internet for more than about 20 minutes, 60 minutes in some cases, we've got them. And there's nothing they can do about it. So they have, again, it's that Hobson's choice. They can either stop or just keep rolling the dice, and eventually they'll get caught.
Nice. Okay, dude. Well, this is very illuminating, educating. Sometimes when I get off these calls, I'm like all fired up. I want to go work out and do some shit. And I'm kind of depressed right now. It's somber. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. And, you look like you're about to say something. Go for it. Yeah, when we release this, it'll just be audio, but Nick and I can see each other. But go for it. What you're about to say something?
Yeah. So it is sombering.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like there's a lot of hope because people do understand it more. The government's starting to pay attention more. That means that there's more funding that is being brought to law enforcement, and on a as far as like a solution, like how do you fight this? We have cracked that nut.
Right.
We have figured that out. And so now it's just a matter of scaling that solution into the hands of as many law enforcement officers who do this as possible. And I know it's not popular to say, but not all law enforcement officers are good at their job, just like not all Navy SEALs are good at their job, or not all PJs are good at their job, right? Population distribution.
And not all parents.
All populations.
And not all parents are good at their job, and that's really where this fucking starts. So if you're
absolutely.
Years ago, I read in a book when I was a single dad, and when I had custody of my son when he was 1 month old, which was rare back. He's 26 now, but that was super rare for a dad to be.
Good for you.
In custody.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. For you. And it was interesting, because I traveled around the world with him. I was doing seminars back then, and I would show up and like go into a new country or coming through the border, and it was amazing to watch like the border patrol agent go, "Where's the mother?" Like, just I am the mother. It was like
right.
they just didn't get it. But what I was going at, there was a quote that I read that I had a picture of my son and I wrote this on the back of the picture, and it was, there were two quotes. One was, nothing affects a kid's life more than a parent's unlived life, which, a different message for anyone listening out here. Like you got to be true to yourself, but you're a parent. You got to take care of your kid. But the heavy one, the other quote was, some famous psychologist said, he said, there's no such thing as illegitimate children, only illegitimate parents. And, that was, there's sort of a few things that I just had on the back, like on those days when I was struggling, like, shit, what am I doing? I got this, trying to raise this kid myself. And just deciding, like the Lou Holtz acronym, win, what's important now. And so anyone listening to this, like, this wouldn't happen if you said this right in the beginning of the show, no dads, no father figures, broken homes, mom working 2 or 3, jobs. And if so, here's something that's kind of like a little epiphany for the end of this, because you're doing all the technical work. You got a life of skill and technology and all of that. But people listening to this, here's how you help. Fucking get your shit together as a parent and take care of kids.
Parent your kids. Absolutely. And especially fathers. I mean, you look at lack of a father's involvement, especially in a daughter's life. And that's pretty detrimental to those girls. And every single victim that we have come into contact with or worked with many times, because Homeland Security or a law enforcement jurisdiction is asking for our help, every single one has either no relationship or a really bad relationship with her father.
Right. Amazing.
So anyway, but that said, like we don't just give these technologies to any law enforcement officer. We specially select law enforcement officers. We find the best and brightest who are particularly dealing with this issue, and then we scale their capability. We take their ability to run a human trafficking case. Usually it'll take about 21 days. We knock that down to 3 to 6 hours, usually around the 3-hour mark.
That's
and
amazing.
So they can do human trafficking cases on demand, at will, anytime they want. And that will make it so that more human trafficking or more detectives will start taking human trafficking cases.
Right.
It's not going to take up so much of their time. And that means that and we made it so easy, really, to find these human traffickers that now it's just a matter of time that they can start taking them off the streets en masse.
That's awesome.
So there's a lot of hope, and a lot of the future looks bright.
You're doing good work, sir. My regards to Greg. We've known each other many years, and I look forward to seeing you. Maybe come visit you down in Albuquerque.
Absolutely, it'd be great to have you.
Okay, be safe, man.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tony. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nick.